What's up, y'all? How you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Well, it happened again, folks, and it's happened again since then, although that's, I think, kind of a different animal. But about 2 weeks ago, there was a mass shooting at a Christian school in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, thankfully, we did not have a Uvalde situation on our hands. In this case, the cops actually gave a damn, and within about 15 minutes, those boys in blue were on site, rocking and rolling. The one guy pulled out his tricked out AR-15. All of his fellow officers came in, backed him up. They went in, took care of business, took down the murderous piece of shit that was wiping out children. And before anybody says anything, no, I do not plan to use preferred pronouns, preferred terms, or say anything nice about, again, I reiterate, a murderous piece of shit who is murdering children. But that being said, I'm going to digress on that because even though I've been wanting to make a video about this for a while, I decided to leave that to people with much more experience and much more expertise than I have. I know a couple guys have done some awesome breakdowns here on YouTube about what happened there and how those cops just absolutely went in, took care of business, did what cops are supposed to do. Looking at you, Uvalde. Now, a couple of those guys have done some really good videos. Just to name a couple, I can think of Mike Glover, John Lovell over at Warrior Poet Society, FNG Academy did a pretty good one. Sure, there's more, but those are just the ones that I know of. But the whole thing got me thinking, and I've had this on my mind for quite a while when it came to other school shootings, because unfortunately I've seen more than a few in my time. Not personally, but of course they've happened since I've been around. Is gun rat culture. Does anybody else remember this? Now, maybe I'm one of the last people in my generation. Technically, I'm a millennial, but you could call me an elder millennial. But when I was in high school, and all through elementary school, especially in elementary school, we had this thing called gun rat culture. At least that's what I've heard it referred to as. Gun rat culture is where you would walk up and down the street in front of my old high school. Well, my school, I guess, because I went to a pretty small school, really small town. Everything from K through 12 was all in the same complex. And in almost every single pickup, because there were a lot of pickups, it is the Ozarks, in almost every single pickup at that school, it would look something like this. You'd have one or two guns up in that back glass, up on the gun rack, and usually it was either a lever gun, a shotgun, or more often than not, a bolt gun. Every single pickup had this. And certain times of the year, let's say it's not rifle season, it's archery deer season, you might see a bow hanging up there. Other times it might be turkey season. You see a lot of shotguns hanging up there. But every kid had one. A lot of the teachers had one. In fact, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here. I try not to do this. But I can very clearly remember one instance. It was a year or two. It might have been my junior year, I believe. But this lady who had just moved down from St. Louis was dropping off her kid in the school. And the way I heard it, she looked at one of these cars and saw a bow hanging up there in the back glass. Big old Hoyt hunting bow. And threw an absolute fit. I mean, she went to the principal's office. She was yelling, screaming, "This kid brought a weapon to school. He needs to be arrested. They call the cops, do this, do that." And of course, she absolutely forgot where she was and did not read the room whatsoever. And knowing the school staff, there may have been a couple snickers, but very respectful. The principal actually got on the intercom and called one of the students, who just happened to be a friend of mine. Called him out in front of the school, walked up to the car, and I heard about this from him later. The principal actually asked him, "Okay, Stacy, can you hand me the bow, please? Because somebody's, complaining." Stacy says, "Sure." Reaches in, pulls the bow down, hands it to him. The principal then picks up the bow and goes, "Oh, look at that. That's pretty nice. Yeah, that's got a nice draw. Hang on one second. Let me go get mine." And he then proceeds to walk down the street, gets his own bow out of his truck, comes back, and the two of them have a little conversation with this lady standing on the steps of the principal's office. From what I hear, just red as a beet. She could not be angrier. But she forgot where she was. We're out here in the Ozarks. This is hill country. This is redneck city. Out here, we have gun rat culture. Or at least we used to. And what got me thinking about this is, thinking back to my days in high school, I can't say not that long ago anymore. Unfortunately, it's been almost 20 years. But we actually used to joke about this. Because, yes, we grew up in the generation of Columbine. We grew up in the generation of Virginia Tech. School shootings were just becoming a big thing. Now, even though most of us knew that it was never going to happen at our school, sometimes we'd sit around, especially us guys, macho bravado and all that, and we talk about, well, what would happen if that happened here? What would we do? What would we do? And the universal consensus was, You'd be an idiot to have to try to do that here. Because what would happen is, yeah, you'd get into the school, yeah, you might get a few of us, but everybody who could get outside the building, which thankfully these days there are a lot of good security teams, there are a lot of good security plans for schools. In fact, I help to teach some of these schools. I hope to teach a lot more. But the main thing is to evacuate the building as soon as possible, get those kids out of the building, onto a bus, into the parking lot, as far away from that shooter as you can possibly get them, and hopefully wait for the cops to show up, preferably inside of 2.5 hours and not waiting for a 50-1 majority, so they can take care of business. But what we used to think, and what I'm pretty sure would have happened, if somebody had tried to shoot up my old school, he'd never make it out alive. And it would happen before the cops ever even thought about showing up. Because what would have happened was, probably a lot of us redneck kids, and more than a few of those teachers, would have gone outside, gotten as many people as possible to safety as we could, and then it's on. Now, that may sound like bravado. That may sound like some, macho crap that a lot of YouTubers out there like to complain about. But it's just the simple truth. Kids out in the Ozarks grow up tough. We have to. We grow up around guns. We grow up hunting and shooting from the time we can stand up straight, or at least I did. I got my first shotgun when I was 6 years old. It was a 410, and I still have it. I got my first .22 when I was 10. We grow up with guns. We grow up around these things our entire lives. We grow up hunting, shooting, hiking, doing everything you can possibly do outdoors. And when it comes to defending ourselves on our own, we're very individualistic, which is why we always had guns on racks in the back of the truck. Not just because hunting season was either going on at that particular time, or was just around the corner, we wanted to go out and scout after school, or we just wanted to go out and plink with our buddies after school was over, or maybe the teachers wanted to go out and target shoot, I don't know. But we carried these because we knew we might need them. Now granted, most farm kids around here only carry them around for coyotes and now cougars and black bears and such. But there was always that thought in the back of your head that you may have to use this against a two-legged predator, not a four-legged one. And we always joked that if somebody ever did try to come after our school, by the time everybody got out of that building, probably within about 5 minutes or so, as many people who could get to their guns, could get to their trucks, he'd have that many people to deal with if he tried to get out of that school. And if we went in there after him, he's not coming out. In fact, another slight tangent, won't take long on this one. There was actually an old man that lived on the hill above the school. He actually went to our school administrators after Columbine and said, "Don't worry, if anything happens, I'll take care of it." Now, we all thought he was just joking. Later on, when he got older and unfortunately passed away, found out that he was not joking. This man was a former Force Recon Marine, served 2 tours in Vietnam before being wounded, and when his family cleaned out his house, in his basement they found enough artillery to fight a Third World War. I mean, this guy had, from what I heard, he had M16s, he had short barrel rifles, registered of course, he had, AR-15s out the wazoo, he had AKs, he had sniper rifles, he had bolt rifles, shotguns, he had all kinds of tactical kit dating back to the 80s, because this guy was a badass. I'm just going to come out and say it. He's a certified badass. And if something had happened at my school, I have absolutely no doubt that that man would have geared up, come down the hill, and taken care of business. Probably he would have sat on a hill with a deer rifle and taken out the shooter before any of us ever got a chance to call the cops. And speaking of cops, I know you all have heard me complain about cops. You just heard me complain about Uvalde, rightfully so. Every one of those cops deserves to lose their pension and give up their badge. But cops do not have a constitutional obligation to actually protect you when your life is in danger. Now, yes, they are trained to do it. Yes, they are supposed to do it. That is literally their entire job description. But there is nothing in the Constitution that says they have to do it, and the Supreme Court of the United States has actually said they do not have an obligation to protect you, even if your life is in danger. Cops are trained to solve crimes, not stop crimes, is the way I've always heard it. Now, that definitely needs to change. But another thing that needs to change is we need to bring back gun rack culture. Because in my school, when every truck and half the cars in the lot looked like this, you have to be an idiot to try to shoot that school up. That's why we had it. It wasn't just for hunting. It wasn't just for target shooting and plinking it with the guys after school. It's because of that factor. Now, yes, there is the danger of theft and all that, and that's another video. It's a whole other subject. But out here in the country, you know not to mess with another guy's guns. When you saw that rack up in the truck, you didn't mess with it. Even if you were a buddy. I mean, half a dozen times I got into other people's cars or other people's trucks and there was a gun in there. The only time I would ever touch those guns is potentially to move it out of the way if I was in the back seat and it just happened to be laying there. And I would always ask, hey, you mind if I move that? Oh yeah, sure, go ahead. You don't just mess with another guy's guns. You don't just mess with another guy's car. You definitely don't mess with another guy's girl. Otherwise, the first two might come into play. But what I'm getting at is our society, our culture has degraded and just changed so much, even from the time when I was a kid. And I'm not even that old. I'm 30. Oh, the real victims here are whoever, not the 6 people who were just murdered. Because you're too busy trying to please the people who like the shooter to give a damn about the victims. I'm going to get off my soapbox now before I get too far down that rabbit hole. But you get what I'm saying. People need to remember what it was like back in the days when there was a gun in every rack, or a gun rack in every truck, rather, and people looked at that, saw all these vehicles lined up and down a street, and even if you had the thought of going into that school, into that building, into that business, into that area, and doing some kind of mischief, you saw those guns, and you thought, if those are in the car, what have they got in the house? This is an open carry state. We weren't constitutional carry yet. But today we have constitutional carry states. Missouri is a constitutional carry state. We were one of the first ones. We had the SAPA, for crying out loud, and we're about to get it back. Bad people will never cease to exist. There will always be evil people in this world. There always have been. There always will be. When people get it into their minds that they want to go out and do something violent and do something evil, there is no amount of legislation that will ever stop them. You look at shootings like Nashville, you look at shootings like Louisville, like Columbine, like Virginia Tech, like any of these. First thing everybody wants to jump to is, oh, gun control, take away the guns, take away the assault weapons, which is a useless term, it doesn't even exist. But take away this, take away that, pass more laws, restrict this, restrict that. None of it does a damn thing, people. Because you're overlooking the key problem here. Laws are already in place. Murder is illegal. Shooting guns in public is illegal. Taking a gun to a school is illegal. Carrying a gun in a school is illegal, which I've had my thoughts on that. But you get what I'm saying here. All the laws in the world that are already in place do not stop these things from happening. All the rules and regulations and all this other stuff that people want to throw out there, it's already here and it does not work. But you know what does work? These. Because when Mr. Bad Guy goes up to that school and he sees these sitting in the back glass of every vehicle lining that street, he thinks twice. When he goes to that little country hayseed bank out in the middle of podunk nowhere, walks up to the bank and sees these hanging in the back glass of that big red pickup sitting in the parking lot, he thinks twice. When you put a big sign up in front of your school that says the staff members of ABC High School are armed, trained, and prepared to meet you with violent force, or with lethal force rather, if you decide to shoot this up, you think twice. And now, I'm a huge proponent of this. I have been for years. If Mr. Bad Guy comes walking into a school and sees a 6-foot muscular veteran, maybe wearing kit, preferably not, but standing there, staring them down, ready to take care of business if something were to pop off, they definitely think twice. If they see armed security, I'm not talking about the school resource officer, the 50-year-old guy from down on the force who's 2 years away from retirement. They just need a place to put him to get him out of the way. Not that guy. an actual officer, a privately trained security professional, or better yet, a veteran or a parent or somebody who is giving up their own time to be there to protect the lives of children with a gun, they think twice. Because as we have seen time and time again, the one thing that stops mass shooters, that stops a bad guy with a gun, is either a good guy with a gun or the threat of a good guy with a gun. What always happens to these mass shooters if they meet even a modicum of resistance? They either give up or they off themselves. Happens every single time. Now, what's my point in all this ranting? Well, it's very simple. We need to get back to gun rat culture. Now, whatever your thoughts on guns, I really don't care. You're free to have your own opinion, just like I'm free to have mine, and I'm free to put it out on the waves for all of you to enjoy. Or not enjoy, that's your prerogative. We need to go back to a culture where having these in your car is not a crime. It's not frowned on. People don't look at you with a lever action 30-30 in your back glass and think you're an animal, and think you're a psychopath who's just out to shoot people. No. Back in the day, they saw that, and probably people like me, the first thought is, nice rifle. Where'd you get that? I kind of like it. Where can I get one? Second thought is, I'm glad that's there. Because if something were to happen, there's a gun right there. And I guarantee it's loaded. And either me or somebody else can get to that, and we can neutralize that threat. Guys, Uvalde PD sat outside of that high school for 2.5 hours. They arrested parents and locals who were trying to go inside that school and save lives. They stopped them from doing it. They disarmed multiple people. They arrested parents trying to go inside and save their children. At Nashville, even though these police officers are very heroic, I give them the utmost respect. I'll buy them a beer any time of the day, or any day of the week, rather. They are the example which all police in this country should go by. It also took them 15 minutes to get there. 15 minutes, where a crazed, homicidal maniac had all the time in the world to do whatever she wanted, and 6 people, including 3 young children, lost their lives because of it. Now, what would the response time be if we had these? If there were cars out in that lot who had rifles or shotguns or pistol caliber carbines, whatever, how many cars in Nashville, Tennessee do you think, especially at a Christian school, because Christians tend to like guns, if there were a few of these racks in the back of a few cars in a lot of that school, you're looking at 3 to 5 minutes. If any of those schools had handguns under the seat, I mean, properly trained operators and all that, of course, 2 to 3 minutes. If there were well-trained teachers with concealed carry permits in that school who heard those shots and immediately sprang into action, 30 seconds. If you had a security guard, a brave volunteer, a well-trained concealed carrier, a parent who is giving up their own time to be there and protect those children, instantaneous. Guys, we need to get back to the good old days when a gun rack in the back of your truck was a sign of safety, not a sign of paranoia. We need to get back to the good old days when we realized that the only thing that stops evil people with guns is good people with guns. It's been that way for a very long time. Even before guns were invented, people carried swords for their own protection, as well as the protection of those around them. There's a reason why all the old knightly oaths included phrases like, protect the innocent, defend the defenseless. Because if you are that person who has taken it upon yourself to take up arms, to get that training, to accrue those skills that make you not only a very dangerous person in your own right, but dangerous to those who would cause danger to others, who would be a threat to others, in order to help people, not harm them. If you are the kind of person who has put in the time, who has put in the money, who has dedicated yourself to becoming as dangerous as you possibly can, but you have done it for all the right reasons, then you should be the person allowed to go in and save the day when the day needs saving. And no, that's not a hero complex. That is just the cold hard truth. If we can go back to gun rat culture and everything that made it possible, this would be a far better world. Gonna step down off my soapbox and just remind everybody out there, stay trained, stay armed, and stay frosty, my friends.